Awesome, thank you. Hi everyone, my name's David Korntha. I'm the Associate Director of Talent Acquisition at Hillel International. Welcome to So You Want to Be a Rabbi, Hebrew College. We are so excited to welcome the team from Hebrew College and learn more about the institution, their programs, and hopefully help all of you along your journey in maybe becoming a rabbi. We've been doing these sessions throughout the month of June with most of the major rabbinical schools in the United States. They've been really great. Our recordings will be available by the end of the month, so keep a lookout for that. And with that, I'd also love to introduce Becca Habelow, who's going to be working tech for us. So if you have any tech questions, please feel free to chat Becca. And then I also want to welcome Rabbi Danielle Lashaw, who's with us at Hillel International as well. So with that, Rabbi Daniel Klein from Hebrew College, take it away.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you, first of all, to the Hillel team, David, Becca, and Rabbi Lashaw for arranging this. We really appreciate it. I want to thank my friends and colleagues for being here as well, Rabbi Gita, Karasov, and Rabbi Daniel Schaefer, who we're going to hear from in a little while as well. Both of them are graduates of Hebrew College. And most importantly, thank you to all of you for being here. It is an honor to spend time with you and to meet with people who are thinking of making their life's work to serve the Jewish people, to serve the world as a rabbi. I realize most of you are, I'm guessing most of you are in process of that, at the very least thinking about it. And it is a pleasure and an honor to be a part of your journey in whatever way we can. I think the most important thing is finding the right path for yourself in the world and the right place to support you in that journey. So if that ends up being the rabbinate in Hebrew College, fantastic. But wherever we go, we wish you well, and anything we can do to help you, it is an honor and a pleasure to do that. So my name is Daniel Klein. I'm a graduate of the Rabbinical School of Hebrew College, and I've been working there for almost 10 years now as an associate dean overseeing admissions and student life. I am very lucky and fortunate and blessed to do this work, and I'm very happy to be passing it off to Geeta, who is just graduating, becoming the director of admissions at Hebrew College, and I'm becoming the dean of students. So it's a real pleasure to be with all of you today and share a little bit about the school. What I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen right now, and what I have on here is a PowerPoint that includes an agenda of how we're going to use our time. So as you can see, we're going to go through probably for about 15 minutes. I want to share with you an overview of the school, broken down a little bit about the big picture of Hebrew College, the overall institution, and then focusing very quickly on the rabbinical school, our approach to spiritual leadership, some basics of our program, the curriculum, placement, application process, and a little bit about financial aid. I just want to tell you up front that there's no way we're going to cover all of these areas in detail. These are just going to be kind of headlines of each of these areas to give you a little bit of a sense. I'm sure Geeta and Daniel, when they're going to share afterwards a little bit about how they came to Hebrew College and what they're doing now, and they'll probably sort of illuminate, flush out the picture a little bit more. But without a doubt, this is just an introduction, and I want to invite you both for questions when there's time for that during this program, but also really you should feel invited to be in touch with any one of us, particularly me and Geeta to start off, should you have follow-up questions. So just a little bit about Hebrew College, because the rabbinical school is one part of a larger institution that was founded in 1921. I just want to give you the little bit of the context within which the rabbinical school sits. It's a Jewish educational institution that's a part of the greater Boston Jewish community. So really it's been sort of a critical part of Jewish life in Boston for almost 100 years now, but our graduates for decades have been serving much more broadly than just the Boston Jewish community, in particular now with the rabbinical school that was founded in 2003. So it's a more recent program of Hebrew College. Our graduates are even more widely spread out, as we'll talk about briefly when we get to placement in a little while. Hebrew College has never been affiliated with a movement, and that continues through since its founding in 1921, and even with the rabbinical school when we were founded in 2003, we're explicitly founded as an institution trying to serve the Jewish community as broadly as we could. And there's two real foci of the school. One is graduate leadership programs, so the rabbinical, cantorial, and education programs, and the other is community education, so non-degree programs. And the reason I mention this is also just a little bit of a sense of the structure and how it works together. These are two symbiotic parts of the school, where the graduate leadership programs are working within the community education program to both get experience and to serve. So it's this really wonderful combination that the school has evolved into over the years. So that's a little bit about the big picture of Hebrew College. It's actually a really fascinating history that I will not go into now, but these independent schools serving the communities have a long and really rich history within the American Jewish community that's really fascinating. For another conversation, really what I know you're all here for is to learn more about the rabbinical school. And I think I always enjoy starting with sort of the big picture of our approach to school. And I would say there's three pillars to what makes us who we are. Three core elements of our educational approach. One is Ahavat Hashem, which is we're trying to help people cultivate an inner life and Jewish practice. And what's important to say about this is we don't have a set idea of how you need to live your Jewish life. It is a place for people who are looking for a open environment where you're going to be challenged and expected to find an honest, authentic expression of Jewish life and practice in your life. Right? That's part of what goes along with being an independent school, not affiliated with the movement. The second piece, closely connected to that, is Ahavat Torah, where we're going to help you cultivate knowledge of and a relationship with Torah. So this is a place for people who really are interested in being in a Beit Midrash context, learning the texts of our tradition in the original, and cultivating the skills to do so throughout your life. So in some ways, I think these are a unique pair, the openness of what your religious spiritual life can be, combined with sort of a real depth of engagement with text in the original. And part of what we're hoping for, and particularly through this combination, is that you will come to feel a part of the community of people who are having this conversation of sacred living and sacred meaning that we call Torah. And that's part of what's sort of like the depth of relationship that we're hoping people will cultivate. And the last leg of our approach is Ahavat Yisrael, service to Jewish people in the world. This is a place where we really have as sort of a part of our model, both of community as well as leadership, is cultivating the habits of heart and mind to meet people where they're at and to serve. Community is a critical part of what we're doing. And part of what's so challenging for us about this particular time period we're living through is, we have made a commitment that our program is an on-campus full-time program where you're going to spend, as you'll see in a moment, you're going to spend a lot of time together with people. So figuring out how to cultivate community in an online setting has been a really important challenge that we've been working on, because it is so central to what we see the work of a rabbi being, and therefore the part of the work of rabbinic education. So what I want to emphasize is that while I've talked a lot about relationship with God and Torah, I want to say that I really believe this is a practical approach to rabbinic education. We do, as you'll see, we do have a part of our curriculum that is sort of what you think of when you think of practical rabbinics. It's what you think of. You'll learn about how to do life cycle events, pastoral care, management, budgeting, all that stuff, and that is critical. But part of what I want to say is that the emphasis of our program is this notion that before you can be a spiritual leader, before you can be a rabbi, you have to be a Jew. That's the basis of rabbinic work. So yes, it's critical that you know how to balance a budget, but it's essential, right? You could learn that without going to rabbinical school. You rarely in your life are going to have 5 or 6 years to cultivate and really deepen your spiritual life, which is truly sort of why, sort of the core of what it is to be a rabbi, combined with loving people, caring for people. So this cultivation of habits of heart and mind and skills for service is really critical. I was just reading in an early Hasidic book, the Noam Elimelech. He talks about a very sort of classic Jewish idea of nichnasim, dvarim hayotzim min halev nichnasim lalev, things that come forth from the heart enter the heart. So that if you want to touch people, if you want to connect with people, it has to be coming from a genuine place from within you. So that's an old Jewish teaching. What the Noam Elimelech says is actually that teaching is also, in addition to it being about your ability to connect with other people, it's also about yourself. That when things come out of your heart, when you are rooted in a place in Jewish life and practice and leadership where your teachings are coming from deeply within you, they also re-enter your heart and serve as a source of nourishment for you as well. So it's practical both in the sense of building your capacity to teach and lead and guide people, but also for practical in the sense of sustaining yourself in this work. So that's the big picture. Let me just talk like a little bit more, going from like, okay, those are nice, beautiful ideas. How does that come down into an actual program of learning? So just to be very explicit, it's a 5 or 6 year program, depending on your Hebrew level or text skills coming in. And it's labeled, the years are Mikorot, which is sort of foundations or orienting year through Shana Hay. It's full-time on campus when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. The Shana Gimel year is in Israel. And you graduate, you're ordained as a rabbi, and you get a master's in Jewish studies. That's sort of the typical program. So the learning model, as I was saying, this is a place for people who love Torah and want to cultivate a relationship with Torah and the skills of studying Torah throughout their lives. And the learning model reflects that. It's really a combination of a yeshiva or Beit Midrash with a graduate school. It's Beit Midrash in yeshiva in the sense, well, actually hold that thought for 1 second. It's graduate school in the sense that, you have classes, there's secondary source reading, there's going to be papers and finals and all of that. And it's a rigorous program in that way. But it's Beit Midrash and yeshiva model in the sense that there's no grades, actually, it's pass fail. We want to make this as much as possible your learning experience that you are sort of taking responsibility for, and where we want to minimize unhealthy learning incentives. It's also Beit Midrash and yeshiva. If you look at the schedule, a typical day, again, when we're not in quarantine, is you're on campus most of the day, Monday through Thursday, and we get out at 1 o'clock on Friday, either in Beit Midrash or in class. Right, so that's more of a yeshiva kind of model. You're going to spend, if you do the math here, you're going to spend more of your time, or about half of your time, in the Beit Midrash as you will in class. So, the model is really trying to bring these two things together: rigorous learning with, sort of that gift of being in a Beit Midrash, of being in dialogue with each other, with the text and yourself. The curriculum is also more of a yeshiva, where you can see we have academics, but there's also spiritual growth and there's service built into it, right? So it's some combination of graduate school, Beit Midrash, yeshiva, and a professional development. And in some ways, you could map this onto the 3 pillars that I mentioned before of Ahavat Torah, Ahavat Hashem, and Ahavat Yisrael. So in academics, right, there's classes. We have a whole, obviously, primarily Judaics, with a real emphasis on Talmud and Chumash, the first 5 books of the Tanakh. But also, of course, a significant emphasis on professional development. There's also a real emphasis on spiritual growth. Part of that, of course, happens in the classroom in Beit Midrash, but part of that is through regular tefillah, which is a wonderful, ever-evolving experiment and creative process, because we don't have a set way of this is how you daven, this is how you pray. We're going to try to help you cultivate a nourishing tefillah practice that's rooted in Jewish tradition, but actually is a prayer practice, right? There's a big difference between saying a bunch of words, saying liturgy, and actually praying. We want to help you learn to pray through the forms and traditions of Jewish tradition, but really cultivating a practice that speaks to your heart. And then also reflection within that, and various programs to support you in your spiritual growth, like spiritual direction, which is regular meetings with somebody who is in conversation with you about your spiritual life. And then, of course, cultivating your capacity to serve through internships, through the community experience of being at Hebrew College in this pluralistic environment, and through specializations within the curriculum, which you can see here. If you want to tailor the program more to your interests, you can do a rav-hazzan program, which is a joint rabbinical and cantorial degree. You can do instead a master's in Jewish education. So when you graduate, instead of being ordained and getting a Judaic studies degree, you'll get a Jewish education degree. Or you can do a specialization that doesn't rise up to a master's level, but is still significant work in spirituality and social justice leadership, pastoral care, chassidut, or halakha. Some very ambitious people do 2 of these, but in general, people need to choose from among them. So let me say that was all very quick information about the structure of the program when you're in school. What people obviously want to know is, that's lovely, but can I get a job, particularly from a non-affiliated institution? We have roughly 120 graduates and a 95% job placement rate. So very happy to say that people are getting jobs who are graduates from our program. You can see the numbers here. Roughly 50% are working in pulpits, and roughly 50% are doing other things like working in Hillel, which Gita did before coming to rabbinical school. And I was hoping that one of our graduates who is currently working at Base Ithaca would be here. So we have a bunch of people in the Hillel world: communal leadership, Jewish education, and pastoral care. It's worth noting in the pulpit jobs, roughly 30% of our graduates who are in pulpit jobs are working in unaffiliated congregations, like you might expect. What that means is roughly 70% are working in affiliated. So the breakdown is 30% non-affiliated, 30% in conservative congregations, 30% in Reform congregations, and 10% in either Reconstructionist or Reform congregations. So people are getting jobs in all of the major movements of Judaism as well. So that's a quick bit of information about placement, mainly to assure you that if you come to Hebrew College, you can and will get a job. Just one other quick thing. People are serving all over the country. We have people in California, Colorado, Texas, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, etc., all over the country. And increasingly, the more we have graduates out in the world, the more people are spreading out. So if you're thinking of applying, just a brief bit of information, and then I will wrap up this portion of things. We're looking for people who are in alignment with our approach, an openness of what Jewish life can be, a love of Torah learning, and a commitment to serving and loving people out in the world. And we're looking for people, obviously, who have the capacity to thrive in an intense academic setting, who have good written and interpersonal communication skills. You do need to have a BA as an accredited institution. You do need to have a BA to attend, but you do not need to take the GREs to attend Hebrew College. In terms of preparation, the main thing that you need to do is develop your Hebrew skills. I'm not going to go through the details of this. The short answer is, the short bit of information is to have at least 2 or 3 years of college level Hebrew, and ideally some experience studying text. If you're interested in more about this, we're happy to talk more about this, but we do have a pretty high, I would say, prerequisite in terms of Hebrew. But what I want to say is that it's not just about technical skills. It's also about where you are in your journey. Is rabbinical school the right next step for you? And what I would say is that, rabbinical school, the analogy I often use is kind of like jumping into the deep end of Jewish living. You should really already be in the shallow end, which is to say that you should already be in the process of thinking about, what does it mean to live my life in relationship with God, to have a prayer life, to have Shabbat in my life, and how can I grow in these things? I strongly encourage you to be thinking about those sorts of questions and trying to deepen yourself in those ways, because that's what you're going to do in rabbinical school, but it's really important that that's already begun prior to. We're looking for that kind of preparation as well. Why don't I pause here? The application process is, if you're interested in it, we can go through it at some point. Needless to say, there's an intense application process. And the main thing to say about financing is, as much as possible, we don't want money to be the obstacle to coming. We give roughly between 30 and 80% reductions in tuition to students. So we can talk more about that in detail, but I want to pause here. I've talked a lot, and we have these wonderful alumni who have joined us. And I would love for you to get a little more sense of the school from hearing from some people who have gone through it. So why don't we start by, if you could, Daniel, and then actually Geeta and then Daniel, just briefly introduce yourself and what you're currently doing professionally. Let's start there, and then I'll ask you another question.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. My name is Geeta. I just graduated from the rabbinical school like 2 weeks ago, so I'm a very fresh new rabbi off of the Hebrew College Press. And I'm currently on vacation before I start work. As Daniel said, next week I'll be starting as Director of Admissions and Student Life at Hebrew College. And before I came to rabbinical school, I was the Director of Engagement at Michigan Hillel and was an Ezra Fellow there. And I think a lot about what brought me to rabbinical school has to do with Hillel work. So it's really nice to be back with all of you today.
Great. Paul, you're going to come back to that very thought in 1 second. Daniel, just briefly introduce yourself and what you're currently doing.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel. I work at Temple Ohabei Shalom, which is a Reform synagogue in Brookline, Massachusetts, and I've been there as the assistant rabbi for the last 2 years since I graduated from Hebrew College.
Great. Great, thank you. And as I said, I was hoping Rabbi Haley Goldstein would join us as well. I hope everything's okay. She was not, I'm guessing, able to be here for some reason, but she works at Base Ithaca currently. Why don't you, Daniel, if you want to keep going and share with us a little bit about how you ended up choosing Hebrew College and what was in your mind, on your mind as you were making that decision, both to become a rabbi and Hebrew College. I know that's a big question, but if you could share a little bit with us, that would be great.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'll say I'm somebody who thought about being a rabbi since I was a young kid. I thought Hebrew school was fascinating. I loved learning about Judaism. I thought the tradition was amazing. I loved being connected to this ancient people. I loved the history, the feeling of being in synagogue on the High Holy Days. And most of my life, I had family members say to me, like, you should consider being a rabbi. And after I graduated college, I'd been a Jewish studies minor. My rabbi was telling me, you should be a rabbi. And it was always interesting, but I always had a lot of doubts whether it was the right path. It felt like a big commitment to make, not just a job, but really a whole life commitment, a vocation, a calling, whatever you want to call it. And so I was hesitant. I took about 10 years after graduating college, and I worked in nonprofit, I worked in education. I tried a lot of different things out before I kind of came back to this idea of being a rabbi. And a lot of my education and training had been intellectual and social justice oriented. It was not necessarily leading prayer services or being comfortable studying text. And so those were always one of my hurdles. And when I started exploring rabbinical school seriously, I looked at almost every liberal rabbinical school, from RRC to HUC to JTS and AJU. I'd heard about Hebrew College. I'd heard really great things. It felt a little daunting. I didn't think my Hebrew was going to be up for it. And so when I applied, I actually applied to HUC and RRC. And those felt like they would be the best fits for me. And I decided to go to HUC, which was the Reform Seminary. And I spent my first 2 years there and had a mixed experience. There were a lot of great things about it, but it just really didn't feel like the right fit for me. And I was struggling to figure out exactly why. It felt like a big move to consider shifting to a different program. But I kept coming back to Hebrew College, and the more that I was in the rabbinical world, the more I kept meeting Hebrew College students and alumni and feeling like these were the people I was really connecting with. And so my second year at HEC, I decided to apply to transfer, and I got in and I came, and it was a great decision. It really felt like the right fit for me. It felt like a family environment. There was a warmth and a sense of caring, and also a deep connection to text and learning that really met my needs. And so that's a little bit about my journey of how I got to rabbinical school, and I'm happy to talk about the different institutions with anybody who's considering those in the breakout rooms.
Thank you so much, Dan. I just want to emphasize part of why we asked Daniel to join us is, as an example of how important it is to, if you can, to the extent one can on the way in, figure out where the right fit for you, the right place for you is. It just so happens that Daniel transferred from HUC. There are people who occasionally leave our program and go elsewhere, and this is in no way meant as a, sort of a comparison, but more to say that the journey is confusing. Sometimes you can't know until you actually get somewhere what the right fit is. But what we want as much as possible, hopefully through this process and others, is to help you figure out where the right place for you is. Geeta, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your process of coming to rabbinical school, choosing to be a rabbi, and choosing Hebrew College.
Great. I feel like every time I answer this question, it comes out a little different. So we'll see what I remember today. I, unlike Daniel, did not grow up thinking I wanted to be a rabbi. The thought never occurred to me. I was really uncomfortable at the idea of becoming a rabbi. We could talk at a different point about how I think gender has a lot to do with that, but we'll save that for the next call. I grew up very solidly grounded in the conservative movement. And so when I did think about pursuing a path as a Jewish educator or a Jewish professional, the only options I really even knew about or was familiar with were from the conservative movement. And that's where my rabbis and my teachers had studied. And when I was working at Hillel, I think I really traced back the first time I admitted to myself that I wanted to go to rabbinical school to being at Higa and realizing that I wanted to go to the breakout sessions that the rabbis got to go to. And I felt like I was in the wrong room. And I felt like that was a metaphor for my career. Like, I want to make sure that I go get the education I need to be in the room having the conversations that I want to have. And the rabbi at Michigan Hillel at the time that I was working closely with was a Hebrew College alum. And so it was the first time I ever had a personal one-on-one relationship with someone that went to Hebrew College. And as we worked together, it started to become a reality of, like, maybe I started admitting out loud to a few people that I wanted to go to rabbinical school. You see their reactions, and then you decide if you're going to keep telling more people. And that was a really, that was a really meaningful process to go through. And again, I really did not know much about Hebrew College, but what I was thinking about was what type of environment I needed to be in to do the growth that I needed to do. And I think what I was seeing a lot in my work at Hillel, and what I was thinking a lot about, was we as Jews, I felt at Hillel there was always a lot of pressure, like, what are we as Jews doing out in the world? How are we as Jews speaking out on certain issues? And I felt like there was a disconnect sometimes between, like, who was I as a Jew before it was like this collective, who are we as the Jewish people? And I think I really needed to go somewhere where I was going to have to look internally and really think about my own Jewish life, my own connection. It was like I needed to take a step back from all of the institutional movement world, and I needed to kind of go to a space that was going to really push me to think about my own inner life, a lot of what Daniel already spoke about, and ask me what my Judaism means to me. And so for me, it was actually just, I needed a shift. I needed to be in a different type of learning space, and Hebrew college, just from when I went to visit, it felt kind of scary to, I don't know if any of you are feeling this way about Hebrew college, but it felt like, well, if I've never heard of that place, or I don't know anyone personally that went there, it feels like this leap of faith. So for me, actually going to visit and being in the building, I remember thinking, I want to daven here. Like, if this is a place that I want to daven, that's a good sign. Like, this needs to be a place where I feel like spiritually nourished. This is where I want to study Talmud. This is where I want to study Chassidut. And so I think it just kind of clicked into place, trusting that that feeling would take me forward. So that's a little bit of where I came from.
Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, needless to say, in these crazy times, coming to visit is a little trickier. Ideally, or at least one of us would have been in the building so you could sort of see a little bit more about it. Instead, I happen to be in a stairway in Cape Cod right now, so my apologies. But hopefully, that, God willing, in the not too distant future, we will be able to travel again. And I would encourage you, wherever you're interested, to go visit, spend some time there. At the very least, do as much as you can to interact with folks like in these settings, or one-on-one, to get a sense of it. And by the way, for us, you have an open invitation when visiting is again allowed, to come whenever we're in session and works for you. We also generally have a open house prospective student event in the fall, which you're most welcome to as well. If you could, Geeta, maybe we'll continue with you sharing about, if you could describe your experience at Hebrew College, like choose one, is there one word that sort of like captures it, and why that is? And then maybe a little bit also about how the experience, sort of this experience helped set you up for the work that you are going to be doing now. Like, what was it about the experience that was most impactful in preparing you for being a rabbi? So I'm imagining it's sort of like a connected sort of thought of sort of the experience, if there's one image or one word, and how that has set you up for serving in the world as a rabbi.
The word that comes to my mind immediately, I think you touched on in the presentation, but is honesty. I think Hebrew college taught me, and it's kind of like the Noam Elimelech teaching you just talked about. Like, I actually had to unlearn a way of learning Torah and text in order to start learning. And I think rabbinical school for me was a lot of unlearning, that it wasn't about memorizing text. It wasn't just about coming and like filling my head with as much knowledge as possible so I could spew it to other people. Rabbinical school was actually about an honest conversation with myself about, and with my community, and with God, with the Jewish people, with the world. Where it's like, how do these texts honestly sit with me? What's coming up for me? Where do I feel called to do work? And there was really an environment at Hebrew College of, because we're pluralistic and everyone's coming from different places, you can't just default to like, well, this is what everyone's doing, so I'll do it. Like, there's no default. Like, it has to be what does my Shabbat practice look like? What does my prayer practice look like? How do I think about God? I couldn't kind of hide behind the party line, which maybe I had done in other institutions that I was a part of. And so for me, that honesty felt so refreshing. And to be honest, it was really intimidating at first. Like, it felt, I didn't know until I got to Hebrew College that I had not been so trusting of like having a total honest relationship with our tradition. So that's just the word that comes to mind. And I think as I am now beginning my work as a rabbi, which I am hopefully going to be accompanying other people along their rabbinic journey, I've really been thinking a lot, not to bring it always back to Hillel, but it feels really similar to the work I was doing at Hillel that I felt I wanted to be doing in a more honest way, which was, if I'm accompanying people along their Jewish journey, I have to authentically and honestly be in my own journey as well. Like, it can't just be I'm spewing these one-liners to get people to feel connected. It has to be coming from a much deeper place. And I just feel really grateful that being a rabbi means that you get to be on your own. Your job is to actually be in your own journey so that can hopefully help others along theirs. So I think it was the process of learning and being in relationship to Torah and God that Hebrew College really opened up for me.
Thank you. Daniel, same question at you. If you would share, it'd be great.
The one word that comes to my mind is relationships. Hebrew College to me, I love my learning. I love the davening. But what really made it stand out was, I think, the relationships with my teachers and my classmates. You're on a first name basis with everybody, which I think sets a certain tone and a sense of intimacy, which is really valuable. The moments where I struggled the most as a person and as a student, I felt like my teachers fully met me and cared about me as a whole person, that who I was as a human and all my needs mattered more than my academic learning or filling out finishing a test or a paper. I felt really cared for, and that people really met me. And the relationships that I developed, especially in the Beit Midrash with my chavruta, with my study partner, are things that are going to stick with me forever. And I feel like I had some more wisdom about that is starting to vanish from my mind. I just came back from vacation, so my brain is still, I think, on vacation a little bit.
No worries, that's great. Do you want to share a little bit? Maybe that'll come to you as you continue to talk. The other part of the question was sort of how the experience helped set you up for the work you're currently doing.
Yeah, I feel very lucky. I had an unusual journey, obviously, going to one rabbinical school and then another. I was a little nervous going to work as an assistant rabbi at a Reform synagogue and how that would fit, but it's really been a great fit for me. And we have another rabbi. She actually went to RRC. So the synagogue is a Reform synagogue with one RRC graduate, one Hebrew College graduate. And the fact that we're able to take our learning and not just give them what is in Mishkan Tefillah, in the Siddur, give them additional learning, additional texts, which maybe previous rabbis didn't have, I think has prepared me well. And in rabbinical school, I had internships at MIT Hillel, at 2 different pulpits. I had great learning experience, which kind of set me up to feel ready to be successful. And now I remember what I wanted to say about relationships. I had a crisis recently. I had a problem at the synagogue that was very acute and time sensitive, and I really didn't know what to do. And I happened to have the phone number of the dean of the rabbinical school, Rabbi Dan Judson, in my phone. So I just gave him a call. He didn't pick up immediately, but he called me back an hour later, and he spent an hour on the phone with me, helping me problem solve and figure out what to do. And I am not special. Like, he did not do that just for me. He would have done that for everybody. And I think knowing that I can call on any of my teachers at any time and that they're going to respond and be there and help me out is, I think, why relationships really stuck out.
Great, thank you. We're going to go into breakout rooms in a minute. So if people want to ask questions to Geeta, Daniel, and myself more directly, we can. I just thought we'd wrap up this portion with one other question, if each of you could respond fairly briefly, a minute or so, of what advice do you have for people such as the good people on this call who are considering becoming a rabbi? Daniel, do you want to go first and then Geeta?
Sure. I have 2 pieces of advice. One is study as much Hebrew as you can, study as much text as you can. The more you do it, the better you are, the better prepared you're going to be for any rabbinical school. The less time you're going to spend on your homework, the further you're going to be able to go. Just any way you can do that on your own at your synagogue or Hillel in Israel, it's worth the time you can put in ahead of time. And I assume everybody here is in their final year of college or just graduated, or no. But I would say take a couple years after graduating college and do something. Whether it's, if you think this is a path and you want to test it out, go work at a synagogue or a Hillel. If you just want to go have life experience and try out some other career, do it. Don't be afraid that if you do something for a few years, that this won't be a possibility for you. I think having life experience and being able to ultimately relate to students or congregants as having had that experience is going to be so valuable, and it's going to actually refresh you and prepare you for rabbinical school. So if you haven't had that experience, whether it's traveling, learning, do something that's not school for a couple of years and then come to rabbinical school. I think you'll be better prepared and a better rabbi.
Thank you. Geeta, please.
Just for context, are you all Hillel staff or some of you Hillel staff? And some, okay. Yes, some, okay. Maybe in our breakout rooms, you can tell us a little bit more about where you're coming from so we can have that on our minds. What advice do I have? I think it's easy to think about grad school. Like, it's easy to think of rabbinical school like, oh, this is grad school. It's a means to an end. Like, what's going to get me to X place? And I would really encourage you to think about rabbinical school as such a gift of time. Like, you are, if you choose to go to rabbinical school, you are giving yourself a gift of, I'm going to go spend 5 or 6 years somewhere. And that in itself is such a process and a gift. And it's a place that's going to become your spiritual home. It's not just a place that you're going to be going to school. And so really thinking about what is the type of environment that I need to be that spiritual home for me, because I think more important than who you want to be at the end, because I promise you that's going to change like 10 times between now and then. So rather than thinking about who do I want to be in X amount of years, thinking about who am I today and like what type of an environment do I need to immerse in to bring out like more of me. And I think you'll be happy wherever you choose for yourself with that question in mind. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel and Geeta, so much for sharing this now. Becca is going to magically break us into breakout groups. So I will turn that over to, or I leave it to you, Becca, to figure this out, make this happen. And thank you so much.
All right, thank you. You guys will come back here in about 15 minutes just for a closing.
All right, I think most people are back from their breakout rooms. We hope that was super awesome, getting to know each other a little bit better, and for the participants to get to know Hebrew College a little bit better. On behalf of Hillel International, myself, Becca, Rabbi Danielle, who had to hop off, thank you so much to everyone who's come to participate in these. We still have a couple more. We have Reconstructionist Rabbinical College on Thursday, and we are also doing Academy of Jewish Religion New York and Academy of Jewish Religion California. They're doing a joint session on next Tuesday, and then we'll be done with these for the time being, although we might do another round. But we hope you've been learning a ton. And then thank you to the folks from Hebrew College, Rabbi Daniel, Rabbi Geeta, Rabbi Daniel. Thank you so much for doing this, and we really appreciate it. So. Rabbi Daniel, anything for closing out from your end?
I just want to echo the gratitude. Thank you to Hillel for organizing it, to my friends and colleagues, Geeta and Daniel, for being here. What all of you are doing in serving Jewish students on campus is really extraordinary work. I wish you all the best in that. And as I've said a number of times, if we can be of any help, don't hesitate to be in touch.
Great. So nice to meet you guys.